Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Brian Lawfer and I'm the Vice President here at QuoteWerks. If you have any questions as we go along, please feel free to ask them in the GoToWebinar toolbar questions box as we go along. If there are any questions that we do not answer throughout the demo, we will do our best to answer them towards the end. If you think of a question after the webinar or we do not fully answer your question, make sure to email or give us a call. QuoteWerks has over 55 integrations. This is not one of them, however. We have a number of third-party developers that have created integrations, custom add-ons, and links to QuoteWerks using our API. And you can see these third-party add-ons on our website. And these include integrations to accounting, workflow, CRM, and more. The Excel integration that we are going to be talking about today was developed by Quintadena. Joining me today is Paul Hodgetts, Managing Director, or for some of us not in the UK, CEO at Quintadena. Quintadena has not only been the top QuoteWerks partner in the UK, but they have been the top QuoteWerks partner in the world for the past 15 years. So with that short introduction, I will pass the presentation over to Paul.
Good afternoon, I think, or good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you for coming to the presentation. So I'm going to talk for 15 or 20 minutes about our integration between QuoteWerks and Excel, and you can see on your screen the topics I'm going to cover. So I shan't read those bullet points out. So what is it? It's a tool that we've developed that enables Excel to act as your product configurator for QuoteWerks quotes. Just two things: automates the transfer of data from Excel into QuoteWerks, and it manages the link between the Excel spreadsheet that you've filled in and the QuoteWerks document that you've created. If you're familiar with the QuoteWerks Paste Special tool, it's Paste Special without having to copy and paste. Okay, who uses it? Businesses that configure product. Typically businesses that have complex product configuration requirements, and I've got three real-life examples, case studies to show you today. The first one, topic particularly close to the hearts of those of us in the UK for whom it's early evening, beer mat. And then we've got fire and security maintenance contracting and a specialist engineering design and build. So these guys all have Excel spreadsheets that they use to fill in to generate a configuration and a price, and we pull that into QuoteWerks to present it to the customer. Why do I need it? So if we think about the two parts of that process, configuring a complex quote and presenting and following up that complex quote, Excel is a fantastic tool for building a configurator in. It's got those formulas, it's got the lookups, dialogues. You can write VBA code if you want to. Brian, look away at this point. The QuoteWerks configurator is there, and if it does what you want, then obviously you won't be interested in our tool, but it does have certain limitations in it. For example, if you've got some parameters that you want to set right at the beginning and that will hold all the way through, it's not terribly flexible like that. And so without criticizing QuoteWerks, I would say it has limitations that you might encounter. On the other hand, if you then want to present that quote to the customer and follow it up, we flip over. Excel, if you've built a quote, if you built a configuration in Excel and you want to present to that customer, you've got to get a PDF. Maybe that means you're going to have to manually hide cells or even complete sheets. The presentation's not good. You may end up inadvertently sending the spreadsheet to the customer rather than the PDF. We have seen people do that. Obviously, that might have cost information, very sensitive stuff in it. It's not terribly easy to track revisions of that, either of the one quote that you're doing, or if you get a new version of the master Excel template, how do you make sure that everybody uses that rather than the old one? And of course, if your quotes are all built in Excel, how do you do a report that says, right, show me the quotes, show me what products I'm quoting most often, that kind of thing? It just isn't what Excel was built for. Whereas we know that QuoteWerks has got a very rich collection of features around getting a really nice document to the customer whilst protecting the confidential information. How does it work? Well, the best ways to show. We'll look first a little bit about how you set it up, and then as I say, I've got some case studies. Okay, so my first case study is concerns beer mats, and the spreadsheet that the client brought to us in the first place looks like this. So here is, without going into the details of it, here is all of the parameters that the customer had built around, so they can say whether do I want a square, a sort of round or a rectangular beer mat, diameter, length, number of colors, the material, whether there's foil on it, and this material, and all of these drop downs drive pricing that is pulled in by lookups from these tables, and all of that is exactly as the client left it. The bit we do is tag on another spreadsheet, another sheet called QW, and in that sheet are formulas that pull the information, some static information and some calculated information from the quotation tool. And you can see across the top we've got some QuoteWerks item level fields, so description, part number, quantity base, unit cost, and we've got some possibly less well-known field names, line type, line attributes. And when the system runs, all it does, it reads across this and says, right, these are the field names that I'm targeting, and then it reads down and says, right, I need to add a, test you on this, Brian, that would be a heading line with that text in it, a part number, no cost and no list going into that. That'll be a comment line, some product lines, and I've set some optional attributes on there. So this is going to generate a quote with 4 lines on it based on, and that's what, so in other words, it uses the QuoteWerks field names you've put here and writes this data. And if I typed custom text 01, this isn't something the user would do, this is a setup action, then in fact, whatever, and put a formula in here to pull some information through, that would then write to custom text 01. And that's the principle that all of the examples will show. So if we then go into QuoteWerks and see how that works in as the user would see it. So do a new quote. If you're familiar with this feature of QuoteWerks that allows you to associate a word-based template with the quote and tags the field, the quote reference number onto it, we've got a very similar process, for which reason it's advisable to select a customer and you want a saved quote beforehand. So we're going to call this demo beer mat, because once you've got a saved quote, it's got a quote reference number, and then when I go products, configure beer mat, it's going to, you might have seen that very briefly, it's copied the spreadsheet from the master folder into the QuoteWerks resources folder, it's renamed it for the specific quote, and it's opened it in Excel. And now I can come in and fill this. So if I go, let's say, I don't know, 75 mil by 105 mil, and as the user, I'm just filling in this spreadsheet, and that's the spreadsheet is meaningful to me as somebody who prices up beer coasters all day, every day. How many of these do I want to? How many coasters do I want to put in a case? Well, let's go just 2,000, and how many? And you can see all down here the costs change. What material am I going to use? That, and when I'm done, I just close the spreadsheet. It saves it automatically. Pops up a little window saying I am now transferring the information. When it says you may now close this window, I can close that. And that information has come through from the quote. I can then go to deliver, Got some validation pop-ups there, and select the layout template, preview that, and it's brought me up example. So there's my heading line, there's my comment line, and the 4 examples. And if I upload that to Quote Valley, you can see that indeed it's got a selected option there and unselected ones down here. And if I change that, it reprices it. And that's been in use for many years at this customer. If I wanted to add another item, I can, if I click on that and come back to here, it will reopen the original configurator and refresh that. If I go onto a blank line and do that, it'll give me another blank configuration item, so I can add another set of beer mats or maybe a completely different product. So over here we can see it's actually tracking exactly which spreadsheet these lines came from, and it uses that to decide whether to update the existing one. So when you do your revisions, it can keep track of, it will clone that spreadsheet and work on the new one, so it keeps track of which revision is associated with which version of the configuration, and the copying of it from the master version, the template folder into the resources folder enables you to ensure that if you change the spreadsheet, next time somebody runs it, they'll be working with the new up-to-date one. So beer mat's pretty straightforward example. Let's do something a lot more elaborate. So I'm going to configure a maintenance contract. Configure maintenance contract. Now this company, I said you need a saved QuoteWerks document. If you try and run it with an unsaved one, it'll say this needs a saved document. Do you wish to save it now? And you can press yes, and it will say, and it will pop up the saved dialog. So you can't run it with an unsaved document. This customer provides fire maintenance, fire alarm and smoke alarm and fire extinguisher and security, CCTV, that kind of thing, services all across the UK. They're a big QuoteWerks customer. They've got about 60 corporate licenses. And this is them. They have projects of installing and kitting out new buildings, and then they all have maintenance contracts. And again, they had created this spreadsheet in-house to price it up, and they wanted to use QuoteWerks to present the documents to the customer. The way it works is that they have what they call disciplines, so access control, air sampling. I've filled this sheet in a little bit in advance of the presentation just to save a bit of time now. So each tab along the spreadsheet has a similar sort of layout, site names, and then in the assets, they call them. So and in Aylesbury, we have an AirSense system model and the number of assets, and it calculates the amount of time that the engineer is going to spend on time maintaining that item, how many engineers they need to go to site, and it generates a price for the maintenance work that the engineer will have to do. And you basically fill out whichever tabs you need to use. And if I just move this out of the way, you can see that there are a lot of potential tabs. Let me just add something completely new to the emergency lights one. So you see I'm not totally cheating. So if I say the site is Dudley, which happens to be where I am, choose that. The red indicates authorization required, so that's a note to the person filling the spreadsheet out, and it also affects the way it comes into QuoteWerks. So system model, just make something up, and how many of that, So you can see it can be quite laborious filling it in, but it's information that the people who are working with this will already be completely familiar with using this product. The bit that we're doing is let's just do by others. The bit that we're doing is integration with QuoteWerks. So come on, and then I haven't put enough information in to generate a price, so let's put some more numbers in there. Okay, so we've got some interesting. There's a contract summary sheet which is showing all of the disciplines, and the ones that have been filled in have got some costs on them. I obviously haven't put enough information in to trigger a cost and emergency lights, but I'm not going to worry about that now. Similarly, as before, I just close the spreadsheet. And as before, it's now going to transfer the content of that spreadsheet through into QuoteWerks. That's a very complicated spreadsheet, so it takes a little while, which is why we've got this to reassure the user that something's going on. And where the spreadsheet flagged you need to take action on this, we are writing a color, background on the line type, but you can see we've got section heading lines, we've got for each of the disciplines, we're bringing, we've got a breakdown of the assets that were filled in on that spreadsheet. And if I now go to present that, you can see I've got quite a complex set of layouts going on here. I can do that because I know exactly what format the quote data is going to be created in, and I can create layouts tailored around the way that data is going to be presented to QuoteWerks. It's also pre-selected a bunch of literature documents that were specified by the spreadsheet. So we're not just writing line item information, we're also saying you need to add this piece of literature to the quote. So if I preview that quote document, so we've got a fairly elaborate proposal document, nice front cover, introduction letter to the customer, all of this. This is based on the real document. The only difference is that it's been rebranded to ourselves. We have a summary page, so each service that was filled in has got its total cost first year and ongoing, and then we give a cost breakdown showing for each of the same information but broken down by the services within that. Also coming in from the spreadsheet is which standards the maintenance is going to be done to, so BSEN, ISO standards applicable to those disciplines have all come in from the spreadsheet. Right. And then we have a very detailed breakdown of the assets at each site by the discipline. So at Aylesbury, access control, we have that system, SLA, visits per year, response time, and then that's all presented. But it's all purely data driven from what's coming in from Excel. And then we've got these literature documents that have been pulled in to give more detail about one or two specific types of discipline that have been pulled in. And again, that's now ready to go to the customer. Okay. I think it would be difficult to visualize a quicker way of getting a document like that up and ready to go to the customer if you had to fill it in manually in QuoteWerks. And I think it would be very, very difficult to get a document of that quality out of Excel. I think it's a great marriage of the two products. And the configuration of how that's come into Excel, this is a bit more complex than the other one, because in fact, behind the scenes, it's not just reading from the QW tab. It's actually going into each individual tab and pulling data across from that. But that's a pretty unusually needed feature. But the software has got the power to do that. My last case study is a business called Quint Cables. They manufacture this kind of thing. So bespoke cable connectors on their this is their website. At the moment, they're flagging that they've been working on a project for tank fire control systems. So basically, if it's an electrical component and you want to plug it up, they will build the connector for that purpose. And so this is a very specialized engineering application. So again, configure connectors. Again. And their spreadsheet so this one, again, it's been pre-filled to save just a bit of time on things. So we are configuring 6 different items: big, little, middle, tiny, massive, and long loom, wiring, loom, connector. There's the same thing. Each item has a bill of materials. This spreadsheet was designed to allow the quoting, the design of up to 30 items at any one time. Each item can have up to 30 items in its bill of materials, and you can see they go through this. They fill in the where they're going to get the bill of materials from, what supplier, whether it's bought in, whether it's going to be supplied by the customer, all of that kind of detail. Again, absolutely no need for me as the QuoteWerks consultant who married the two together to know the detail behind that. It's got production run times. These numbers across here are manufacturing quantities. The spreadsheet was designed to allow the user to quote up to 5 quantities of every item at any quantity from 1 to 1 million. At the moment, I'm quoting a quantity of 25 and a quantity of 100. Let's add a couple more on. Let's say I want to do 500 and 2500. So the formulas built into the spreadsheet are pricing these items up for those four quantities. And again, I have a QW tab that is pulling that information. We've got one difference compared to what I showed you earlier, which is that we're also populating header fields. So the system basically has 2 configuration things, which is where are my header fields starting? Where is my list of header fields starting? Read those. And where are the, and then it looks down and says, right, well, that's going into header field custom 19. These you can see are the quantities that I've just specified, the 4 quantity items that I'm going to use. And we can write any other header fields. And then here are my item fields. And on the header fields, obviously, there's only 1 header value per QuoteWerks quote. The item field is 1 per line, and it reads down. On this one, we've also got, we've got space here for up to 30 items, and then we've also got a one-off tooling materials costs. So it reads down there. At this point, it carries on going until it's pulled out. And again, I'll just fill that in. I could, as the engineer, I could fill that in, and this happens over a period of weeks. That is not something that you would sit down and fill in at one sitting. You'd be getting costs from the suppliers, etc., etc., etc. But here's the information coming from the customer. And the quote layout associated with that looks like this. So here are my 6 items: reference, drawing numbers, item reference, part number, description. Apologies for the alignment of the headings there. Here are my quantity breaks. So I chose those 4 quantities: 25, 100, 500, and 2500. And within the layout template, I've got formulas that go, well, there's 100 up there, so I need to subtract one from the next one so that I get 25 to 99 and so on. Unit of measure, that's my unit cost within that, and as you'd expect, the more you buy, the cheaper they become. And the spreadsheet is also calculating lead times, first item off for approval, and then balance the first batch of 100. So, and for each of those, the spreadsheet's calculating the lead times for that item based on the parameters in the spreadsheet. And then there are my tooling and material costs. So the tooling's a one-off cost, and the way the business model is that if you buy enough, then Gwent Cables absorb the tooling costs. So if you're going to order 100, they're not going to charge you for the tooling they have to do for that, and excess materials. And again, this is a real quote. Documents like this go out to their customers. The layout templates behind this, as I say, they can be very elaborate and specific to the type of quote they're doing, because we're not relying on users to say, right, I need a heading line here, followed by a comment line, followed by a product line. We know that's going to come in because that's how the spreadsheet's guaranteeing that it will be. And that's what it does. I think it's a powerful match of QuoteWerks as the tool that's managing the quote with the customer. It's giving you the reportability. Obviously, if you use Quote Valet, it's giving you the ability to choose options, all that good stuff. But it's allowing Excel to do the thing that it's really good at. And of course, Gwent Cables can change the pricing model and the parameters and the costs in that spreadsheet, and they don't need to know anything about QuoteWerks. All they need to do is go into that master folder, open the master copy of the spreadsheet that all other copies will be quoted from, and they can rewire the logic behind all of this as much as they like, provided they don't do anything that changes where this information is being sourced from. So it's a complete independence of content and presentation, which is, if you're into that thing, that's good IT practice. But it allows our customers to own and maintain their configurator and pricing model in a tool, Excel, which they've got lots of skills in the business that can do that. Excel skills are quite a commodity. And after using it for 3 years, they came back to us this year and said, we are making some big changes, so now we need to rework this. And I basically had to go through and figure out what you can see there's some fairly complicated formulas in there, mostly around getting the right quantity from those quantity breaks into the fields. But even so, it was a couple of days work, and that's probably them running for another 3 or 4 years until they, do a massive revamp of the costing model.
Very good. So I was going to say, if anybody has any questions, that would be a good time to ask them. This was a very powerful tool that we're seeing here. I got to see some more examples than what I've seen in the past, so I'm really impressed with what it's able to do. And I appreciate the fact that you showed, the strengths of QuoteWerks and the strengths of Excel, and how that, like you said, marry them together. So it's an even powerful solution. So I really like that. All right, so we have a question here from Alyssa. Does this add-on work if we have our server hosted by QuoteWerks? I'll go ahead and answer this real quick for you there, Paul. Fortunately, if you are using QuoteWerks Web, this add-on would not work for you. It's only going to work for QuoteWerks Desktop. Paul is one of the many developers that have been asking us, very politely, for an API. For QuoteWerks Web, but we currently do not have that yet. That will be coming once we have all of the functionality that QuoteWerks Desktop has in Web. Then we'll go ahead and add that.
I'll add to that, if you have any you only need one desktop user of QuoteWerks, and you could use this for them, and I don't know if that's relevant. The QuoteWerks Web is a mixed ecosystem. You will have some desktop users and quite often it turns out the people who are operating this are office-based engineering type staff, so they may have access to QuoteWerks desktop, in which case you could use it. The other thing is, and I haven't demonstrated, there is an operational mode where you can just get somebody to fill in the spreadsheet, because you don't, although it's designed to be select it from within QuoteWerks and fill it in on QuoteWerks, there is a mode where that's even truer to the original Pay Special thing, where you could just fill the spreadsheet in and then import the content of that. So in that case, you know, the engineer would only need the Excel spreadsheet, and somebody somewhere needs access to desktop QuoteWerks. But yeah, as Brian said, roll on the day when we have the QuoteWerks Web API.
And Alyssa did add in some more here. They actually do use QuoteWerks Desktop, but they use our hosted database. So in that case, Alyssa, you would be able to use this add-on.
Yeah.
And Ralph has a comment here, which I'm happy to read. Very impressive, both the Excel and the QuoteWerks project. So thank you, Ralph.
Oh, thanks for that. Yes, we do reckon that we do know how to get some very elaborate layouts, and from time to time I come up with something and send it to Brian's team and say, can you figure out how I got QuoteWerks to produce this? And sometimes they can't.
Yes. All right, let's see. All right, Joseph, I'll go ahead and answer that one offline. Basically, Joseph had some questions. So we have an Excel tool ourselves, but it's to create the output as opposed to bring it in. And basically, he just wanted that Excel file to keep getting updated that we're exporting. So unfortunately, we don't do that. Oh, Andre has a great question here. What is the cost of this add-on, and where do you go to get more information?
Right. It's a subscription cost. It's per user. It's in the range of 10 to 30 US per user per month, depending on a couple of things that we talk about. But it's that sort of cost. You only need as many licenses as you're going to have people. Again, it's aimed at the engineering design configurator. So if you've got a team of half dozen engineers and 50 odd sales reps, it's probably only the engineers that would need the license. I'm assuming, Brian, you'll give, I mean, you can Google Quintadena, but I'm guessing there'll be a follow-up email with our contact on it.
There will, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the great thing about Quintadena being one of our top partners, or I should say the top partner for the last 15 years, they're very easy to find on our website, but we will include that information as well.
Thank you.
So just to clarify that, so if a user, if a company has 10 QuoteWerks licenses, but only one engineer that would need to use this, are you saying that they'd only need one license of the Excel utility? Awesome. Yeah. Perfect. All right, let's see. I think that's all of the questions that have come in. I think everybody's still wowed by the functionality here.
It's all right, guys, you can wake up now.
I meant that in a positive way there. Let's see, actually we have one more question here from Ralph. This tool would have to be modified for each installation, wouldn't it? So basically question about like the setup and whatnot, and you kind of went into it a little bit
Shall I
expose the headers, but if you could go into that just a little bit more, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah,
for
there is a little setup that you have to do. Is my screen still showing?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Basically, what you have to do is build this QW tab, and that sort of pulls the information from the spreadsheet. That is something that you can do, at least in principle, yourselves, or we will happily do it for you. But it is basically a case of saying, what QuoteWerks fields do I want to target from here? And bear in mind, this is one of the most elaborate examples of this. I'm not sure whether it's still working actually, but we did at one time build one to allow ourselves to quote QuoteWerks UMP, which so for the various, that's a more typical example. It's quite so for a very complex configurator like this spread out over multiple sheets, then anybody who knew Excel formula would get that. It can be time consuming, it can be straightforward depending on what calculations you want to build into that, but it tends to be hours to a couple of days effort to get it a spreadsheet to be compatible with this. But the software, the actual software module is completely standard, and of course QuoteWerks is completely standard, and really the spreadsheet carries, using these lines here, the configuration that it needs to know as to where you're going to send this information in QuoteWerks. So yeah, there's a little bit of configuration you have to do for each sheet that you're going to use. The people that the first example I showed, the beer mats, those guys print and manufacture food packaging. They've got 28, I think, different spreadsheets, and when they go to the product model, you drop that product list down and there's 28 things that they can quote on here. But all of their spreadsheets are almost identical to all the others. So it's about 2 minutes work to add number 29 to the list. So there is some work to do. It's not complex, and we'll help you with it.
Okay, and then just for clarification then, so basically you're looking at the QW tab in the Excel sheet then, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And then, sorry, go ahead.
That is actually configurable. So if you don't want to call it QW, if you want to call it something else, but there's a config file that you can use to change those parameters. But I don't think we've ever called it anything other than QW, because what you would typically, well, it's probably worth saying, what you would typically do then is hide that QW tab from the users. The user would never really have a reason to go into it, and it's full of the formulas that you've created. So we would typically recommend that cell be hidden.
Okay, and then are you just using like a custom menu then to then launch your utility with like the Excel file name?
That is exactly correct. So custom menus, products, configure beer mats is sys install path, Quintadena subfolder, 14 is the name of the application, and then template beermats.xlsx, and that's all it needs to know.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. And then I have a question here from Andre. The QuoteWerks license you will need for this add-on would be standard. Basically, the question I think is, what edition of QuoteWerks do you need for this to work?
It'll work with any, I think. Yes, because the API is supported under all three levels. Exactly. So yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, I think that's all the questions that we have. So if anybody does have any questions, they can just go to quintadena.com. We will also include that information in the email that we send out, and that'll be in the YouTube video as well as on our link on our website as well. Anything else that you'd like to add before we go here, Paul?
No, thank you very much for attending, and thank you, Brian, for hosting.
All right, thank you. I think this is a great add-on, especially if you have some complex configurations that you need to quote. So thank you very much for developing this, and everyone else, have a great day.